everyone, it's Nina. Thanks so much for joining me today. Today I have a couple of cards to share with you featuring Neat Tangled products and also the Starry Colors Gansai Tambi watercolor set. And my card is also going to be featuring a Vellum Shaker card technique. So let's get started and check it out. So here I've got the products that we're going to be using today for our card. I've got the Heart of Gold stamp and die set. We're only actually going to be using the dies for this, but there is a stamp set that you can get with it. You can see that the stamp set has this really cute faceted heart. The die also looks exactly the same. We're also going to be using the faceted stamp set, which I'm going to be mounting into my Misty stamping tool right now. I want to do some heat embossing to be able to create a resist area for my watercolors to sit in. This is going to save me some time doing my watercoloring rather than doing a traditional no-line coloring. I didn't want the lines to be black because I did not want the gold watercolors to be distracted from, so I'm going to be doing some heat embossing to go ahead and get around doing the no line coloring because that would have taken a lot longer. It would have looked really pretty, but I wanted to be able to color right away in each faceted area. So to do this, I'm just going to use my heat embossing and I'll sprinkle some white embossing powder from Ranger onto this watercolor card. And then I'll just go ahead and heat set this with my Wagner heat gun. Make sure that all of the embossing powder is melted. When you're embossing, make sure you keep an eye on the powder. Once you see the powder start to melt and turn shiny, you'll know that that area has been melted completely. If you can believe it, for this watercoloring, I only used 2 of the colors that are included in the Starry Colors paint set. You could color this with all of the watercolors that are included in this set. However, I wanted to be able to try and see how many different variations of gold that I could get using just 2. And to do this, I'm just using more or less water on each area to create different shades of this gold. And I absolutely love the beautiful results that you get. I also love how shimmery these watercolors are. They are super, super shimmery. And when you shine them in the light, they're even more sparkly. I absolutely love the effects you can get with these. You can also color over top of other colors using these watercolors, and that creates a really cool pearlized effect. So I sped up the coloring so it didn't take as long. And here you can see I've colored in all the little faceted areas, and you can see how beautiful and shimmery these watercolors are when you shine it in the light. So, so stunning, and I think you should really pick these up because these are fantastic to work with. Now I want to create a window for my shaker area, so I'm going to be lining up the Heart of Gold die onto my panel and just kind of figuring out the placement here. I'll put it in my Bake Shop machine, and then I'll go ahead and run this through. Now with a die like this, you may want to put an extra shim in. Dies that don't have the opening in the centers where you can see through them, those sometimes have a tendency to not cut all the way, especially in the center area. So if you find that you're having trouble, especially with a thicker paper like watercolor paper, definitely try adding a shim and that will help you out a bit. Now I also ran this through with a border die from My Favorite Things. This is one of the basic stitch line dies. I'm just running this double stitching die through my die cutting machine all the way around all 4 edges, and that's just going to allow me to have the nice finishing edge on this panel. I did end up cutting down this panel to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches, so that way it will cover a full-size card. I didn't show that, but I did want to mention that I did cut this down. So now I'm going to start working on the faceted heart that's going to go inside our shaker area. I've die cut this from some watercolor paper, and I'm going to start watercoloring this using the white gold paint that's included in that Starry Colors set. I left all the negative pieces inside this die for now because I want to be able to have it easier to watercolor, and I felt that having those negative pieces helped a lot to make sure that I got this completely covered with the paint. After I've colored it in and it dried, I'm taking my little craft pick here, this is my Tim Holtz Tonic craft pick, and I'm just popping out the little negative pieces inside of this die. If you wanted to get really creative, you could save all of those little negative pieces and create another card using just the negatives, but that would take a lot of time to glue together, and I wasn't up for that, so I ended up just throwing them away. Now I also want to make this a little bit more of an embellishment, so I'm taking some Versamark ink and I'm pressing this down onto my little heart. And I'm doing this because I want to do some heat embossing to give this a little bit more dimension. And this embossing ink pad is one of my secondary pads. I don't use this for my regular stamping. I use the Simon Says Stamp Clear ink, but this one I use for all of my techniques like this. I'm going to sprinkle on some high gloss embossing powder from Wow. This embossing powder is gorgeous. It creates this absolutely fantastic raised dimension, and I absolutely love the stunning effect. It almost looks like glossy accents, but it's a lot easier and you don't have to wait for it to dry. That saves me time and I like that idea. Alright, so I'll go ahead and heat set this with my heat gun. Just make sure it gets completely melted. And I will also mention that you want to make sure that you let this sit just a couple of seconds before you touch it, because that embossing powder does need some time to dry, so it will smudge if you touch it before it's cool. After I've heat set that, I'm going to now start putting my shaker together. I'm taking some vellum and I'm attaching it to the back side of my panel here, and I'll just use some ATG adhesive to tape that down. I'm also going to use some PPA matte adhesive and apply that to the back side of my little heart. And then I'm just going to attach that down to the window area of my card. And I also applied some clear blocks on top to make sure it will stay in place. Now, I don't know about you, but when I use craft foam, I have so many little pieces lying around from leftover scraps. I save every one of them, and I use them for things like this. This is a great way to be able to make the most out of your little scraps of fun foam. I save them to be able to make little shaker wells, or I can also use them on smaller die cuts and things like that. But this in particular is really great because you can fit them and puzzle piece them together to make sure that you get a perfect shaker well. And then the other great thing about this is that the sides of the foam aren't sticky like foam tape, so the shaker pieces won't stick to the sides of these like they will on foam tape, which is really, really handy, and I absolutely love that. So I'm filling my shaker with a gold sequin mix from Lucy's Cards. This is a beautiful shaker mix that has so much gorgeous gold in it. I filled my shaker well, and I'm just applying some ATG adhesive on the back side, just very carefully to make sure I don't send those sequins flying. And then after I've done that, I'm just going to go ahead and take my card base. This is an A2 size card, and I'll just go ahead and attach this down to the back side of my shaker, and that's going to entrap everything right inside so that way those sequins won't go anywhere, and it's a perfect little shaker. Look how fun this turned out. Isn't this cool? And I love that the soft effect of the vellum really mutes the gold, but still lets it to be seen and really adds a lot to this gorgeous card. Now I'm going to create my sentiment. I'm using some Simon Says Stamp black cardstock, and I'm prepping it with an EK Success powder tool. I'm now going to start stamping my sentiment with some Simon Says Stamp clear ink. I love this ink for all of my stamping for embossed images. I'll go ahead and press this down good onto my paper, and then I'm going to heat set that with some gold embossing powder from Ranger. Just use my heat gun and make sure I get that completely melted, and I'll also heat the backside to help minimize warping. I've attached my sentiment onto my card. I just cut it down into a little banner strip, and I've attached that down with some foam tape. Finally, for a finishing touch, I'm going to use some sequins from Pretty Pink Posh. These are the sparkling clear mix, and I just scattered a few of those around the card just to help finish it off. Now, after die cutting our watercolored panel with the Heart of Gold die, I ended up deciding to use that die piece that we ended up with to create another card. So here I've just added this onto a card base, and I added some gold paint behind it in the sentiment. I ended up creating two of those. And I love how these cards all look so nice together and create a beautiful card set. So I hope you've enjoyed and got some inspiration on using Neat and Tangled products along with some Starry Colors Gansai Tambi paints. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and head on over to the Simon Says Stamp blog where you can get more information on this card, including still pictures and products used. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can find us on social media at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, as well as our blog. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.